Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. It is once again a doozy of a week, so apologies in advance. There's a lot of pretty messed up stuff here in the Sunday Sum Up, so I'm already wavering between two different titles and not sure how long this is going to be, but I think a lot of these stories need to be shared, which again is like, these are stories that I saw over the past week, but didn't really have a chance to talk about or share, which is why we do this. But it feels like this is every week now, which is just, oh God, the dystopia is worsening and we seem incapable or unable or unwilling to challenge that. And it's like, when are we going to break our proverbial chains? Because this is getting kind of intense. There's basically three themes I'm going to focus on, which is the climate crisis, cops being terrible, and how that's going to play into the climate crisis, and just general dystopia stuff that made me go, what the actual fuck? So with those warnings out of the way, welcome to the Sunday Sum Up, everyone. We're gonna need something stronger than coffee for this episode. So first up, there's this charming revelation from the BBC.
A BBC investigation has found that plastic waste from Britain that's supposed to be sent to Turkey for recycling is instead being dumped there and in some cases burnt. The UK exports more plastic waste to Turkey than to any other country. Environmentalists say Turkey can't even recycle its own waste, so shouldn't be importing more. Angus Crawford reports.
Wading through plastic, dumped on an industrial scale. Filmed just before lockdown, all this was sent here for recycling. But now it lines the streets of Adana in southern Turkey. And some of it's a long way from home.
British beef stewing steak. What's this? Union Jack. There's some ham. £3 for two. Last year, the UK sent more than 160,000 tonnes of waste plastic to be recycled here in Turkey. Does this look like recycling?
Once dumped, it's often burned. This fire lasted for 2 weeks.
It was very hard to breathe.
Black smoke covering the area.
This whole thing is not just our waste. We're drowning in other people's crap right now.
We found British waste dumped on sites across the city.
Help keep Britain tidy, reuse this bag to protect the environment.
English people are carefully separating out their waste. But I think someone should come here and follow up to see how it's actually being disposed of.
Our guide is Sedat Gundogdu, an expert on plastic pollution.
So could some of this come from British waste?
Could be.
He takes me to one of the most polluted beaches on the Mediterranean and has a message for British families.
They are feeling that they are doing something for environment because they are sorting cards, plastics, metals, other things. They should know it's not going to recycle. It's coming to our city in dump area.
So yeah, apparently the plastic that was, in the minds of many Brits, we're sending that over, it's going to be recycled, this is great, we're doing our part. It's just burning in Turkish fields. But hey, it's a classic part of human psychology, right? Out of sight, out of mind. We take the government or businesses at their word that they're going to do these things, and we say, well, I'm an honorable person, so I'm assuming these large corporations and government entities are honorable too. And so stuff like this happens. And on a related note about plastic and the climate crisis, there was this new, I guess you could call it, revelation from earlier this week. Just 20 firms produce 55% of world's plastic waste, report reveals. As that article points out, that is over 4 months old, but I'm just learning about this now. And as this tweet also points out in summation of the article, ExxonMobil is the greatest single-use plastic waste polluter in the world, contributing 5.9 million tons to the global waste mountain. Since most plastic is made from oil and gas, the production of plastic is becoming a significant driver of the climate crisis. Yeah, and yet here we are still consuming, fast fashion, and gotta have all my produce wrapped in plastic that is non-recyclable. I remember this hit me like a couple years ago when I was just in line at the grocery store and just realizing how much plastic was in my shopping cart and in the stall right next to me and in the person behind me and the person in front of me and the rest of the store. And that's just one store on this fuck off huge planet. It's a massive problem that needs addressing, and yet a lot of the governments that we have in power seem uniquely disinterested in actually doing what needs to be done. And that's something that a lot of people also don't make the connection between, is that, hey, sure, we want to get rid of oil and gas and things like this. Thing is, that lobby helps produce a lot of products that we are super happy and eager to consume, especially through massive websites like Amazon. So with one hand, we're saying we care about the climate change, and then with the other, actively contributing to its destruction by purchasing shit we don't need online. See how interconnected all the terribleness is? And unfortunately, in even further depressing news, there's not so great news from the Amazon. Most people probably heard in ads or in school and you were doing presentations on the environment, you probably remember that the Amazon is like the lungs of the earth. It just traps so much carbon and produces so much oxygen, and it's just really good and critical, and it's so biodiverse, and that's why we really need to protect it. Well, in classic human fashion, we have turned the Amazon into a net greenhouse gas emitter, according to a study. In a first-of-its-kind effort, scientists have calculated the balance of all natural and human-caused greenhouse gases coming in and out of the Amazon basin, and found that the region is now a net emitter. Congratulations, everyone. We successfully broke the Amazon. So this is how we're starting, and again, we're just starting here. In other reported news from earlier this week, we learned that the ivory-billed woodpecker and 22 other species are extinct. And again, those extinctions are related to, of course, climate change and also habitat destruction and our pursuit for growth and development, which is related to capitalism, which is again killing the planet via climate change. And all this should both terrify and depress us, but what's also especially concerning is that already the, again, capitalist mass media continues to churn out lovely articles like this one from NBC. Under 40, expect an unprecedented life of extreme heat waves, droughts, and floods. You better get used to suffering now, boys and girls. There's no way you can change this. Just get comfortable with the idea of suffering. Give up on fighting like hell to change things and save the planet and secure your own future. Can't have you doing that because we rely on these rich sponsors of ours so that we can succeed as a company. This is totally not a broken dystopian system, by the way. Sure, these heat waves and everything may be unprecedented, but it's not like they were unavoidable. Which means I guess I need to talk about all the drought and shit. So, supposedly genius geopolitical strategists like Peter Zion and Thomas Barnett love to talk about how, no, look, see, we have all this infrastructure here and climate change means we're growing food in further northern regions. It opens up more areas of the world in the north and like Canada and Alaska to agriculture. We're gonna be fine. Someone should have told these apparent geniuses that we are still seeing effects of climate change on existing agricultural areas, which, as these two have rightly pointed out in previous videos, essays, reports, etc., when price of food go up and wages go down, people get very hungry and revolutionary. And yet they haven't somehow magically clicked together that this also applies to America and Canada and many other parts of the Western developed world. A severe drought has affected most of North and South America, including prime food-producing regions, and it was far worse than projections, and it has resulted in increasing prices for things like livestock feed and people's options at the grocery store as the supply chain is disrupted for a variety of reasons from the pandemic. Oh, the Mississippi is a breadbasket, we're fine. Not if the climate and weather patterns become so unpredictable, crop yields become insecure. That does not a successful and secure future make. Seriously, how am I like some internet rando putting this together and people getting paid six-figure salaries to speak in front of the Pentagon can't click this? Which means now that I've touched on security, I can finally talk about all the cop stories I wanted to talk about. So earlier this morning, and entirely too early for this bullshit, I saw this truly dystopian, like, police riot tractor that is something out of a nightmare dystopia game about authoritarianism. But I guess this is really just the logical progression for police in the United States because, well, really just anywhere. Because like I said, with further growing food insecurity because of climate change, as well as mass migrations, they are going to need all the help and all the technology they can to try and keep people underfoot, which is why police funding has actually gone up, because the state has a vested interest in this, rather than actually having police funding going down and being redistributed to social housing like what people in society actually want. And it's not like police still aren't feeling totally free to be absolute bastards. For example, LAPD is openly targeting 2 black activists, Film the Police LA and BLM-LA, who are 2 of the cops' biggest critics. It is clear intimidation and harassment. Apparently, a Black Lives Matter leader was targeted in a 3rd swatting incident, the 2nd since last week, and a well-known LAPD critic was arrested in Hollywood on a criminal threats charge. I know a lot of people throw shade, and rightly so, at the NYPD, but the LAPD is really bad, if not worse, than the NYPD. And it's not just them or the NYPD. It is numerous policing institutions across America, here in Canada, and in most other corners of the world, let's be real here, where they will be openly corrupt and have their own internal gangs. And trust me, these people are gangs because 2 Columbus police officers with the narcotics unit were arrested and charged with crimes related to distributing nearly 8 kilograms of fentanyl, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Yeah, you know fentanyl, that super terrible drug that is stronger than heroin and is really dangerous and resulting in a lot of overdose deaths, including at parties where the supposedly good angelic young white folk go to. It's been declared part of the opioid crisis here in Canada. In the States, it's like, oh, this is a new terrible drug, and that's why we need more police and more funding. Yeah, no, it's the cops who are literally pushing the drugs onto the street. I covered this, I'm pretty sure, in a previous Sunday Sum Up episode where there were cops in Ottawa who were also charged with pushing massive amounts of fentanyl onto the streets. The cops are not cleaning up the streets. They're the ones polluting it in the first place. And we literally have evidence for this. And again, to remind us about this terrible dystopia that continues unabated by the people we continue to vote for, America is still locking people up for their activism, including black women. Black women who bring up the abuses of the police and how they are very much a force for evil and not for good and protection. They are routinely targeted by police. The police will often just drum up some kind of bullshit charge or falsify a charge of some kind, or create, oh, you blew through a red light, and by the way, your taillight's broken, and oh boy, it's abuse time. Like, this is how cops operate. And if you don't believe me, there are plenty of great videos out there on this platform that actually talk about it. In fact, I think That Dang Dad has a really good video about how, being a cop in law enforcement, he was taught to dehumanize people. And so cops and their whole thin blue line is them just protecting their fascist, corrupt fellow pigs. They cover up murders of activists. They stand side by side with each other when one of their own murders an innocent person. They happily brutalize protesters for having the audacity to say, can you please stop killing us? It's absolutely ridiculous, and yet they keep getting more funding and more equipment, and there's still lots of people who don't see a problem with this, because for a lot of these people, especially like people in the suburbs, they feel that the police are somehow this magical barrier that's preventing the absolute, collapse of society. Well, if that's really the case, then why are there still bad neighborhoods and still crime? And oh, look, the crime is rising according to these stats that I pulled out of my ass. I trust what Fox News says about brown people and crime in poor neighborhoods. So if this is all happening, and if these places are crawling with cops, then shouldn't that be really nice? Are the suburbs really nice, safe, and secure places to be because there's a cop on every street corner? We can't abolish the cops because then people will just come and rob me. Cops already don't really stop robberies. It's why there's that whole smart home security thing that's going on right now. It's like, oh yeah, look, smart home monitoring. Just get to your phone and see if someone's at the doorbell and all this other stuff, right? It's playing into that fear that is fundamentally unjustifiable, which also, again, because they're playing into that and trying to get you to buy stuff like that, they're also pointing out how the cops don't prevent that in the first place. Cops will come, take down information, and say, yeah, okay, well, we'll try and do something. But unless you have home insurance, you're not really recouping the lost valuables that have been stolen from your house. And if cops stopped crime, then the places where the cops are found most often in the poor and disadvantaged neighborhoods full of Black people and Latin Americans, then you'd think that those places would be super safe and free of crime. But they aren't, because cops are fundamentally useless except as an arm of the state to keep us down. And conservative logic weirdly kind of proves this just through their talking points. The cops, especially to marginalized people, are far more of a threat than other people in the community. That's how bad cops are. And on top of that, there's this gem from Canada where apparently the RCMP union says it supports a Mounties' right to refuse vaccination. Police are technically public sector employees, and so they should be vaccinated. Also, if they aren't vaccinated and then arresting and beating up people and talking without masks in the back of police cars, that's a vector for disease spread. So, not a great idea, but then again, I'd expect nothing less from cops. So that's all the terrible news about cops I got. But remember how I was talking about marginalized voices? Well, here's a little insight into the discourse over in Britain.
The problem in this country, in all areas, is that minorities always get the upper hand because we're so tolerant. And minorities have to be squashed like that.
Yeah, man, you know, we got such a hand up. It's why we're in control of all the big businesses. We completely run government. We're the wealthiest people. We hold all the levers of power, and the police are fully on our side. We really have the best possible deal on this bitch of an earth. So yeah, that's the starting point for some discourse in the UK, which again just really shows how much work needs to be done, and with every passing day we have less time to successfully do this. And this isn't like a big thing, but I just saw this and had to like sit and disassociate for a hot minute. Today I learned the estate of a woman who lived on Park Avenue, who I helped with computer stuff when I was an underhand for $10 an hour, and who I stopped working for when she refused to pay for $300 of work I'd done, sold a Warhol portrait of her for $2,144,000 after her death. The richest people really be the cheapest bastards. And again, this is a great example of why rich people philanthropy is fundamentally bad and useless, because what they will see fit to give as worthy is a fraction of their actual worth that would then, through taxation, be much better used improving the conditions of your average person in society, no matter our political background. Like fighting someone over $300 of work while your estate is casually selling $1 million portraits. Something is fundamentally wrong with our society. Oh, which means I should probably talk about this lovely chestnut that I learned about, also dealing with a mega rich asshole. Bill Gates is now the largest owner of farmland in the country. Not even kidding, the Gates family's land holdings by state are astounding. They have over 242,000 acres of farmland, 27,750 acres of just transitional land use, and 1,234 acres of recreational land use. They own the most land, and they're not stopping. I wonder what the purpose of Bill Gates holding most farmland in the United States during a coming crisis, which will see food prices skyrocket, and to see whoever controls the food fundamentally controls society. So yeah, this motherfucker needs to be taxed into oblivion and also have his lands forcibly seized. And then finally, our last story today, America has passed yet another new threshold. Over 700,000 people have died of COVID in the US, making this the deadliest pandemic in American history. The latest deaths were concentrated in the South and included younger people than before. Every age group under 55 saw its highest death toll of the pandemic this August. Does that about sum up the dystopia for you? This was another week's worth of stories that I didn't cover, that I would have happily covered. And I had to keep them until today. And this is what we're seeing. The worsening of society, the worsening of the planet. Cops getting away with the worst instances of abuse of power and just being given more and more funding, despite that being the last thing that many in society want or need. The rich continuing to get richer and profiting off of the hard work and the suffering of millions, if not billions of people on the only planet we have to live on. And yet, the thing in the back of my mind that is screaming out to me is just, yeah, man, it's just another Sunday. That's what this is now. This has just become so common. It's the worst form of business as usual. The pandemic showed us this great big warning sign. The IPCC issued that do or die report. And like I said, I think in last week's or the week before's video about, oh yeah, well, you know what that means, kids. Biden's gonna do nothing. It's not, enough of a change to stop us from actually doing more oil exploration. The world is literally dying. And we see our politicians doing fuck all about it. And we see the wealthy get richer and richer. And like I've said before, I'm waiting for the straw that will break the camel's back. And I don't know if that happens when it needs to happen. Now, I mentioned Thomas Barnett and Peter Zion earlier, and they're pretty smart in a variety of ways. They really know their stuff geopolitically. They know a lot of how the capitalist world works. Their blind spot is that they don't also apply it to the United States and its potential vulnerabilities, because that would not sit well with the investors who they need to keep happy in order to keep America's economy going and secure, which keeps them gainfully employed. Which again shows they fundamentally understand how this all works, which is why we need to extrapolate some of what they have said to what happens next. As the climate crisis worsens and as people get further and further squished under the boot of capitalism and the pressures of climate change, and as we see that begin to affect food prices, it's going to cause destabilization around the world, but also higher food prices here in our countries. And when that happens, while we're also not getting higher wages, if the governments don't act on that, that's going to result in even more conflict, and that will be when the proverbial straw breaks the camel's back. But the police here are basically militarized at this point, having gotten so much free military equipment. That's going to have to basically be some form of insurrection. And that is not going to be good. And that is only going to further destabilize the rest of the world. And that's how the apocalypse well and truly kicks off into high gear. And how far away this is, I really don't know. And what's really sad is that I feel like this is going to happen and I'm going to live to see it, but it was all entirely avoidable. We didn't need to get to this point, and we still don't need to see all these terrible, distressing, dystopian stories week after week and day after day. But it continues because of this terrible system that still a good chunk of humanity continue to blindly and faithfully support, despite it actively harming them and feeding into its own self-destruction. We are either gleefully and dejectedly marching towards the cliff, and no one is doing anything significant about it. And that's what's bothering me today.